Maintenance commands, reporting, bit of tuning. Now, so maintenance operations. So far, nearly all our backups have been done with defaults, and they've worked wonderfully. But now we're going to be a bit more sophisticated in what we're going to do, particularly with retention policies. We'll see how to get some reports out of the system. The best reports you'll be writing SQL against the repository views, but RMAN itself provides a few reports. We need to get rid of obsolete backups. Of particular importance, updating the repository with external changes. If, for example, you're writing to some file system or tape device, your system administrators may well have put a retention policy on that. Perhaps your system administrators delete everything in your backup directory that's more than 6 months old. Well, sure, RMAN won't know it's gone. So we have to update the RMAN repository with anything that might have happened that it doesn't know about. Archive log file management is vital. We need to ensure that we never delete an archive log or an archive log backup that might be needed, but equally that we do delete archive logs and archive log backups that are no longer needed. Then there's the business of long-term backups, long-term or off-site. Why do you need these? Typically it's regulatory requirements. In Europe, there's a requirement to keep copies of data in the financial environment for 7 years. I think you have the same thing with SOX and all that. So you may have to create long-term backups that will be kept perhaps forever. You need to tell RMAN how to do that. If you do this business of sending backups off-site, a bit old-fashioned nowadays, but some people still do it, off-site backups. Well, the backup exists, but if the tape has been removed from the tape library, RMAN can't use it anymore. You've got to tell RMAN about that. And tuning, well, there may not be much you can do, but we'll see a few things. So, that's this chapter. The concept of a retention policy. Do you have service level agreements? Anything on the lines of saying how long you've got to keep backups for? How long in the past you should be able to restore to? Do you have any agreements on those lines? If not,
we have some.
Right. I was saying if you don't have agreements on those lines, someone probably needs to write them. And that someone might be you. Yeah. Because with all this business, there's no right and wrong. There's only whether what you are doing is conforming to documented procedures. If, for example, maybe audit, you get some dreadful request, something typically it's financial information. Maybe there's a fraud investigation. And it turns out that some data was changed. Maybe 2 years ago. Well, what did the data look like before it was changed? I don't know. Can you restore the database back to 2 years ago? I don't know if you can. That would depend on your retention policy for your backups. Now, if you have that requirement, what did the data look like 2 years ago before some fraudulent changes were made, and you can't do that restore, will you be in trouble? Well, you won't be if the service level agreement says we keep long-term backups for 6 months. But if there's no such agreement, well, somebody's going to get blamed. You've got to document all your retention policies. There's no right or wrong. There's only what's documented as being agreed. So we need to make sure that backups become obsolete when they exceed the retention policy. And there are 2 retention policy options we can use. Use defined policies. Oh, well, there are 3 policies. Recovery window, redundancy, and none at all. Defaults. Right, RMAN target / show all. The default retention policy is redundancy 1. That means RMAN would like to have 1 copy of every file. Would like to have 1 copy of every file. Well, list obsolete. Whoops, it wants a bit more. See to use the help. It found obsolete. I need reports. We're on command. Report obsolete. Report obsolete. Well, apparently I've got a lot of obsolete backups. So report obsolete, the retention policy was applied, and the default retention policy, redundancy 1. So what Oracle is doing here is it's reporting all backups that aren't needed because I've got more than one copy of whatever it is. Right. I copied the control file at some point. I don't even know what a lot of these backups are. I've done so many. But these are all backups of objects where there are multiple copies. I'm just going to delete the lot. Delete obsolete. And I should now have at least one copy. Well, I hope I've got one copy of everything, but no more. Report obsolete. Nothing. Report schema. Okay, and I shall backup data. No, I'll just delete all my backups at the moment. Delete backup. That's going to delete everything. Do I really want to get rid of them? Yes. Okay. Report obsolete backup. Well, I've got no obsolete. I've got no backups. Backup data file. Which data file should I back up? I'll back up a small one. Backup data file 6. That's just a little 5 megabyte file. Backup data file 6. It's done the backup, and it's done a control file SP file auto backup. And report obsolete. No obsolete backup found. Do it again. Backup data file 6. Report obsolete. And guess what I'm going to see? The first one is now obsolete. So that's all redundancy is. It's a very crude mechanism. RMAN would like to have one copy of everything. If I then use the command report need backup, the retention policy is 1. It is not saying that I need to back up file 6, because it does have one backup of file 6. But I don't have any backups at all of these other data files. So redundancy is a very crude mechanism, just one copy of anything. Whereas if I were to, let's see, show all, if we configure retention policy to redundancy 2, it will now like to have 2 copies of everything. And we see report need backup. Right, I've still got my 2 copies of file 6. But if I go to redundancy 3, it will now be complaining that I need to back up file 6 as well. And there it is. So I've got 2 backups of that.
Pardon me, could you do that show all again?
Yup. There we go.
So there's a new configuration. Actually, let me throw a question to the students. So these settings, which you can configure with the configure command, obviously, what is their persistence? How long does the setting last? Have you got a good line on that?
What did you say?
I thought they stayed permanent if you did them within RMAN, but if you do them within the run command, only during the link to the run command.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, John can speak to the run command. I think that's appropriate. It's within the scope of the block, although I don't believe the command is configure in that case. Is that true, John?
It will be set. It will be set.
Thank you.
Which is slightly different. Slightly different.
But you're right, Rob. You're right. If you do configure, or Dwayne, I'm sorry. If you do configure, it is the persistence is permanent. It stores it in the catalog. But John, I'm seeing a new one that I'm not familiar with. Configure RMAN output to keep for 7 days.
That is release. That is release 12. It's a release 12 enhancement that's very nice indeed. There's also a view which is related to it. It doesn't necessarily mean what you think it would mean. Let me just...
What's output?
Yep. I'm going to work on the Windows for now because I've got 1 or 2 scripts here that are helpful. // There's a very useful view that came in release 12. And it is now $, where is it? No, it's not $. This is why I wanted to work under Windows. I think maybe it's RMAN. $RMAN output. Very useful view indeed is $RMAN output. So if we look at that, describe $, but this is an important point actually. It's an interesting point of architecture. $RMAN output stores the results of your RMAN sessions. Right. So, for example, I have just done, if I exit from RMAN and go back in, report schema. Let's do a report schema. And what we will see here is the output column will have what I did there. So the results of all the, let us select, so it is like a log that's maintained within RMAN itself. So if I select outputs from $RMAN outputs, where I'll use the session where stamp equals select max stamp. This is just to get my most recent session. Select max stamp from $RMAN output. You'll see an example in one or two of the scripts we're going to look at later on, by the way. And there you see the output of my last command. So this is an invaluable technique for finding out what happened when you last ran a backup, querying this. And to come back to what you were saying, Dave, that's one of the release 12 new features. It's going to attempt to keep output for 7 days. But the output is not stored in the repository. It's not stored in the repository. All the other configuration commands are stored in the repository, which is why they're persistent. The output is not stored in the repository. It's only stored in the instance. And if you restart the instance, the view is cleared. The view is cleared.
Thanks, John. That's very handy. But
it is, but losing it on the restart is annoying.
Then it'll be always empty.
What I'll do is I'm actually going to go a bit ahead to the next chapter. And our next chapter, because what I'm going to do is show you one of the scripts we use. Just another window. Oh, lordy, lordy. Oh no, I can't do it now. My IP address has changed and Amazon security is throwing me out. But I'll show you how we use this in our production databases to send emails of what happened at the last backup. So, recovery window or redundancy is the retention policy that you get by default, and it's very crude. And you see here, RMAN wants to have 3 copies of everything, and it knows it's got 2 copies of that file. But there's no intelligence behind this. If you back up every hour, I'll reach 3 within 3 hours, and that will mean I could restore to any time in the last 3 hours. If I back up once a week, it'll take 3 weeks, and then I could restore to any time in the last 3 weeks. It's a very crude mechanism. So what Oracle will normally do, and Oracle's best practice, is to use recovery window. So typically, I want to be able to undo 3 days worth of processing. Maybe that's your service level agreement. Make sure, oh, thanks for offering, Dave, but I'll do it on the other system instead for the time being. How far back in time do we want to go to? 3 days, service level agreement. Do you need to support an incomplete recovery to any point in the last 3 days? That will be one way of doing it. Now, what is suitable for your environment? 1 day, 3 days, a week, 30 days? You specify a retention policy, a recovery window, by agreement with your users. Now, for practical purposes, let me ask you a question. When you last did any sort of restore, I am prepared to bet it was from last night's backup. Have you ever had to restore from a point significantly in the past?
Points
in the past, you said?
Have you ever had to restore from significantly far back in the past?
Far back?
No.
No.
That's it. You don't have to, do you? When you do any sort of restore, 9 times out of 10, it's your most recent backup. That's just the way it is. It's just the most recent backup. But you have to have an agreement for how far back you could go to. And this is typically incomplete recovery. Typically it's incomplete recovery in the RMAN environment. And what you're doing at the moment, of course, is full close backups. And if you have to do a restore, I'm sure you're just restoring from your last full close backup. But you need to discuss it with the users. You know, would you ever need to restore some point in time? And if so, how far back would it be? Because once again, there's no right or wrong. It's just what you've agreed. And you do it just like this. Configure retention policy to recovery window of, say, 3 days. And what that means is Oracle will now be attempting to keep one full backup, level 0 or full, that is at least 3 days old, plus all the archive logs or incrementals needed to recover it to any point in the last 3 days. Older backups are considered obsolete, provided you've done another full or level 0. Provided you've done another full or level 0. So, having done that, well, previously, well, do I have any obsolete backups now? I will not have. Report obsolete. I won't have anything obsolete here because my last backup, I deleted all my backups and my last one was only 20 minutes back or whatever. Whereas on my Windows system, I should have a few, unless I deleted my backups here as well, which is quite possible. RMAN target / list backup shows you what backups you've got. Next command, list backup summary, gives you 1 line per backup. So I've got a few backups going back to the 8th. Right, and so I should be able to, in fact, all my backups go back to the 8th. If I do a new backup though, backup database, I might get something newer. So, recovery window, the intelligent algorithm, and that will allow you to do point of time recovery to any time within that time frame. Yet redundancy is the crude one. This is just some examples of syntax, and there are more in the exercises as well. So,
John,
yes.
on the redundancy one, the number of backups that's kept are level 0s and full treated the same, and intermediate?
That's correct. Level 0s and full will be treated the same. Incrementals won't be counted.
Won't be counted. Okay, all right.
Which makes sense when you think it through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, so I've now got a backup there. Okay, and if I were to configure retention policy to recovery window of 1 days, which is rather horrible grammatically, right? And report obsolete. Oh, no obsolete back. I don't have a backup. No, of course, I've only just done my backup. So it's still not prepared to say that anything is redundant. My backups date back to the 8th, but I haven't done a full, I've only just done a full backup since. So these will become redundant when the backup I've just done, will become obsolete when the backup I've just done is 24 hours old. Right. I hope when you run similar queries to all of these on your databases, where maybe you haven't deleted all your backups, you'll see some interesting results coming through. You've got the list command. So generally speaking, previous slide, report tells you what you need to do. List tells you what you've done. It's not always like that, but that's the general rule. You know, report is what you've done. Sorry, report is what you need to do. List is what you've done. Bottom of the slide, vitally important, the cross-check command. Cross-check does the reality check. I mean, if I list backup summary, let's stretch that window. List backup summary. Right. These are all my backup sets, keyed, and I've got incrementals for update. Well, that will be the copy I made when I copied my database. Remember, I did that backup as copy. And then I've got these backups made on the 8th, and this is the one I just did. I backed up once. All I did, I just said backup database. So why do you think it created 2 backups? I said backup database, but it's actually created 2 backup sets.
Because you did a backup level 1, and there was no 0.
Close, but no cigar. No, it's the auto backup come through. The auto backup. Yep, that's what it will have been. And if I do now backup archive log all, we'll see again. So these reports, maybe not perhaps quite telling you what you think they're telling you. Back up the archive logs, and I expect we'll now see a total of 4. One is the archive log backup, and the other is the auto backup. Yeah.
Why doesn't Oracle put the backup of the SP file and the control file in the primary backup, if you will? So in this case, there would only be 2.
Mm-hmm. If I list backup of control file, oh, thank you. It has indeed, if we look at the last 2, so that was when I backed up my database, which was sets 23 and 24. And we see that there is indeed a control file backup in 24. There isn't one in 23. It's on it separately. There's one in 22. Yeah. So it's separated. I'm only getting the auto backups here. Syntax, what I can do is backup database, including current control file. There's a bit of syntax, or include, what's it want? Including something I normally will include, yeah. Not syntax I normally use. Include current control file. And that will put it in the same backup set. Or it would with earlier releases. Let me just check here. So you can specify.
Is it not the auto backup in that case?
No, it won't. The auto backup will always be separate. That's always separate. Think it through because of the well-known file name. I can direct my normal backups anywhere I want and rely on the repository to find them. But it's vitally important that the auto backup always goes to the same place so that Oracle can find it even if it doesn't have access to the repository.
Gotcha.
Right. Understand the architecture and it comes through, I hope. There you see starting full data file backup set, including current control file, and that's in the one piece. And then my auto backup has gone to a separate piece in the default location. Cross-check. Cross-check backup. Right, this does the reality check. What it does is it goes to the repository and finds every record in the repository of a backup piece, and then goes to the disk or tape to say, does it actually exist? Does it actually exist? So, and it looks as though everything was found to be available. What happens if my system administrators have deleted some stuff for whatever reason? Well, let's do that. Del. So I'll delete one of my backup pieces, such as that one. If I physically delete it, run my cross-check. Found to be expired. And if I list expired backup, there it is. It can't find that backup piece. Why not? Because I deleted it. Expired is an odd term. What expired means is Oracle can't find it. It's very different from obsolete. Obsolete means Oracle doesn't want it. Expired means RMAN wants it but can't find it. And if you attempt to do a restore, RMAN will ignore backups flagged as expired. So what do you do if you get an expired backup? You've basically got two options. That thing actually is deleted. So there's only one option applicable to this, and that is delete expired. Oops. And it wants to know a bit more. Delete expired backup. Delete expired backup. Do I want to delete it? Yes. Now that is not deleting anything because the file's already been deleted. What it's doing is removing the reference to that backup from the repository. It's removing the reference to the backup from the repository. It isn't deleting it because it's already deleted. But there's an alternative. If I list backup summary, no, I don't want to do that. I want to list backup. Maybe it was something a bit different. I'll rename a file. If I rename that, it's the backup piece. So I'll rename it to so-and-so dot gone. So I've just renamed it out the way. Oh, we don't give a path, do you, with Windows? Slightly different from Unix. There we go. So I'm renaming my backup piece to a different file name. And now, if I do a cross-check, something's missing. It's that one. So it's found an expired one. What can I do now? I could rename it back. If I rename it back, so rename bkp.gone, put it back. So I've now renamed it back to what it's meant to be called, and it's still there as expired. But if I cross-check it, and now we find that's cleared. So you've got two options if you find an expired backup. Probably you're just going to use delete expired because it's gone. But if it were just something, perhaps the file system went offline. So you're backing up to a disk destination, maybe you're backing up to an NFS server. And at the time you run crosscheck, the NFS server isn't running. All your backups will be flagged as expired. And if you run delete expired, your repository will be empty. Your NFS server comes back online, all the backups are there, but Oracle's forgotten about them. So you need to be a bit careful with delete expired. Think to yourself, just why can't I find this backup? And if it really is gone, delete expired. Otherwise, repair the damage, cross-check again. And you can also cross-check your archive logs, list expired, and so on. All this information comes from the repository views. If you've got the control file repository, it's $backup, or you can log on with SQL Plus to your catalog and query the RC views. And they're just various examples of some. Oh, we've already looked at RMAN, $RMAN output, haven't we? Well, that will show you your configuration settings, your configured defaults, $RMAN configuration. But $backup or RC, they're mostly documented, and most of them are self-explanatory anyway. And we'll look at some in our. We've looked at some already, haven't we? So that's what I've been talking about. An obsolete backup is one that, according to your configured retention policy, is no longer needed. The no prompt keyword, by the way, normally you'll be doing this in scripts. And of course, you can't have a script that runs through cron stopping you for yes or no. So the no prompt keyword takes care of that. Expired backups no longer exist. It's perhaps loose wording. They can't be found, typically because of some sort of system administration work that's deleting backups that are more than 6 months old or whatever. Then we've got a few more bits of syntax. You can move your backups around. And that brings us to the idea of the Catalogue Command. Perhaps we had a problem. Maybe all these backups are on an NFS server, and for whatever reason, your system administrators have moved it all to a different machine. Well, I'll simulate the move to a different machine. If we look at my server here, all my backups are in the fast recovery area. Okay, Oracle, Data, ORCLZ, oops, that's not right, Oracle, fast recovery area, ORCLZ. These are all my backups, backup sets in directories per day. And you see them there, fast recovery area, ORCLZ, backup date, and then the date. Well, maybe, for whatever reason, the system administrators relocate my NFS server so that that lot, control today's backups, the 9th, control X, delete it. That was with control, I'll do it and I'll relocate it to say TMP, control V. Right, so my backups are now there and they've been deleted from there. So I've relocated that whole directory to there. Now, what do we have here? There it is. We've got cross-check, backup. Lots of expired stuff. List expired, backup. But they've actually just been moved. So Oracle thinks all these are expired. Well, they are expired, but they've just been moved. So what do we do? Well, you've got the Catalogue command. If I delete expired, that's going to be pretty disastrous. I mean, I could just delete it. They won't do any long-term harm. But before I do that, the Catalogue command. Well, Catalogue, you use Catalogue something. Now, the Catalogue command, I think, is a bit of a misnomer. It's nothing to do with a recovery catalogue. The Catalogue command tells Oracle to search a disk or tape library for backups and put them into the repository. So you can catalogue an individual backup piece. So if you know where that backup piece has gone, you can catalogue backup piece and tell it, there it is. In my case, I'm going to use a variation. I'm going to use catalogue start with, catalogue start with, C:/TMP/ whatever it was called, 2017_03_09. 2017_03_09. And what this will do is navigate down the directory tree, seeing what it can find. It's found those. Do I want to catalogue them? Yes. And that reads them into the repository. I can now do my delete expired to get rid of the old references. Oops, delete expired backup. To get rid of the old ones. Because those references are, of course, history. So the catalogue command tells Oracle that your backups have been moved. Or maybe you did a manual backup. Perhaps you reverted to your old procedures. Shut down, cold cop backup, startup. In that case, you would catalogue wherever you made the copy. And everything then would then be included in the repository and Oracle could make use of it. Right. Now, that was moving backups with operating system commands. You can also move them manually. Maybe I want to get these backups back where they're meant to be. So list backup. So these ones are in the TMP directory. That's a bit silly, isn't it? What I could do is backup sets. And I'll backup sets 28, 27, 26. Oh no, 26 is where it's meant to be. But 25 is not. 25. And 24. And 24 is where it's meant to be. Okay. So those are in the wrong place. I'll back them up and I'll use delete all input. And this will back up the backup sets into the fast recovery area. So this is moving backups from within the RMAN environment. So it should be reading them from where they are, in effect copying them into, by default, the fast recovery area. And then, because I said delete all input, removing them from that TMP location. So that should have got rid of everything and put things back where they're meant to be. List backup. And everything, I hope, is now back where I wanted it to be, I hope. And if we were to navigate down here, well, I've still got one there, but note everything else is gone. I must have missed one, but the others have all gone. So these are just commands you'll be experimenting with. There are all sorts of options, all sorts of syntax change. There are examples in the manual, examples in the exercise, and of course the examples in the documentation. There's a particular command here, backup recovery area and backup recovery files. Backup recovery area, well, whether these will work will depend on your hardware. If I try to backup recovery area, it fails. To destination must be specified. I've got to tell it where to go to, because the default location is the FRA, which is a bit silly, because that is how can I back up the FRA to the FRA? So I have to tell it where to put it. And this would be a way to go back to what I mentioned yesterday, the Oracle recommended 3-tier strategy. You would back up your recovery area to the tape device and deleting the archives and incrementals as you do so. And that gives you your 3-tier structure. Primary storage on disk, daily incrementals and archives going to fast recovery area, where you apply them to the copy, and then daily long-term backup as you go from backup the recovery area to the tape library. The other option, backup recovery files, if you're not using an FRA, that's the alternative. And that will back up all your backups no matter where they happen to be, which of course is more intelligent if you're not using the FRA. And then there's a few bits more. Yep, you can manually update the repository, change backup set so-and-so unavailable. I mentioned the possibility of off-site backups. And then if the tape comes back, you stick it back into your tape library, mark it as available. Catalogue start with, I mentioned, can scan a file system. This is particularly important. There's in the current release, it can also scan tape libraries, which it couldn't do in earlier releases. And that was a nightmare. I had to deal with it once many years ago, back in release 9. All the backups were going to a tape library, and the tape library was a network attached device. The tape library broke down. IBM provided a replacement. All the tapes were taken out of the broken one and put into the new one. But of course, it was a new IP address. So the backups were perfect, but RMAN couldn't find any of them. Every backup marked expires, and there were about 10 or 20,000 of them. and they were perfect. It's just they were in the wrong device. Well, in the current release, you could catalog start with and point it towards the tape library, and it would load all the tapes, scan all the tapes, bring all those backups into the repository, rebuild the repository. But that's only in the current release. In older releases, we had to write scripts that did a whole series of cataloging the individual pieces. It was a lot of code to write. Okay, next topic, archive logs. Now, if you look at the configured defaults, configure archive log deletion policy to none. These are your options. Configure archive log deletion policy to backed up so many times to disk. So if I were to configure archive log deletion policy to backed up 2 times to disk. Spelling mistake, thank you. Okay, delete archive log all. The configured policy takes precedence. So backup archive log all. Oops. Try again. And now it's prepared to get rid of those. Yes. So only when I've got my relevant number of backups. In a DataGuard environment, you would use those options. I'll show you a couple of scripts at this point. Because I think we may have got, here is a, oh no, that was a different set of scripts. Here's a daily backup script as an example. Format, font, 16. Run. Allocate channel D1 type disk. We've commented out the use of a tape library. Tape library command. This was one of our Amazon AWS systems, where I mentioned earlier we have the S3 storage, and that's loading up the shared object library for controlling the Amazon S3 device. But here we're going to disk, and we have backup as compressed backup set database, format so-and-so plus archive log, format whatever. Very, very simple command here, and delete all input. And that delete all input will not, of course, delete the database, but it will delete, it only applies to the archive logs. So this is all you really need to do for your daily backup. Backup everything, delete, and then the configured defaults. Here we are, in fact, specifying a directory for the format. We're not going to an FRA, but we're relying on configured defaults to take precedence over that. I think we do have it configured that we aren't allowed to delete until there have been 2 disk backups. And the configured archive log deletion policy takes precedence over what you put here. Long-term backups. Right, keep until. So backup whatever, keep until time, or perhaps until 1 year. Keep forever requires a recovery catalog, which is hardly surprising. No matter what you set your control file record keep time to, it's not going to be able to keep forever. Now, there are few anomalies yet. The format command must be specified. You can't use the FRA. If you were to say back up the database, keep for a year, it will be clustering up the FRA for a year, which would cause you serious problems. So you must specify where the format should go, where the backup should go. So this is long-term backups. Now, if you want to keep your month-end backup for a year, okay, backup database. And what will happen there is that automatically, in the current release, if the database is open, You will also get all archive logs generated while the backup was in progress. You will always get the SP file and control file. This is very nice in release 12. Now, basically, backup, database, keep, until time, whatever, will be a fully self-contained backup. There'll be the data files, plus all necessary archive logs, plus SP file, plus control file, fully self-contained. In earlier releases, you had to be a bit careful to make sure it was all you needed. You would probably need backup database plus archive log, include current control file, or perhaps keep them as a separate backup set. But 12, it gives you completely self-contained. Are you likely to have to keep long-term backups at all?
On disk, I don't think. You may have to keep them somewhere else, like on tape.
Yeah, it's usually just regulatory requirements, that you have to keep year-end, whatever, for a certain length of time. And if you do, then doing that, what this means is it will override. They won't be reported as obsolete. Right. So typically, you might copy them onto a memory stick, a USB stick or something, and then you would mark it unavailable as well.
That's a security piece.
The idea of not being able to use the FRA when you do until, that's not at all, no matter how long the until is for, right?
Let's just do a check, but I believe so. Let's back up database. Keep backup database. Keep until. Let's just keep it for 1 day. Sysdate plus 1. Keep until time. Until time. Yep. Can't do it.
Okay. All right.
Yep. So it'd have to be format C:/ oops, thank you. Format C:/ TMP / keep 1 day 1.
That would be nice when you if you commission something or something goes away.
Yeah.
Put the final backup out there in case. You know how we decommission the SQL Server side?
Right.
This probably would be something you would do then.
By the way, I'm probably going to get an error because I didn't put any of the variable names in. So I may well have issues there. Just
so nothing gets deleted from RMAN unless you run the command, right? Even with the retention policy?
That's correct. You would have to issue a delete obsolete.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hit a problem because I didn't specify a variable name. I should have given it typically _%u to generate unique names, and then that will run through. Never forget that those %u to get a unique file name. I always think of U for unique. I don't know if it is or not. So, the second part of the chapter, tuning. Right, you've got a mix of Enterprise Edition and Standard Edition. In Standard Edition, you are not allowed to use multiple channels. In Enterprise Edition, you are. If you want to parallelize a backup of Standard Edition, it's easy, but you have to launch multiple RMAN sessions. So your cron job would launch RMAN to back up half your table spaces, and another cron job would launch RMAN to back up the other half of your table spaces, and they can both run concurrently. But to use multiple channels within one RMAN session, you need Enterprise Edition. Default behavior, RMAN will try to work as fast as possible. So your channels will max out the I/O system. And you've got to configure that. Or consider, not configure, consider. Oh, there you go. That's my keep 1 day backup has all gone through with everything needed. You've got to consider the impact on your hardware if you do too much parallelism. And as we mentioned the other day, you can in fact slow it down if need be. But there are various impacts here. Performance factors, how many disks have you got? Are they striped? What are the transfer rates? What sort of RAID have you got on them? How many devices are you actually writing to? What can they do? A lot of this is completely out of our control, but async I/O is really important. You need to make sure that asynchronous I/O is enabled on your devices. And this applies to all Oracle performance tuning, not just to RMAN. You may get a nasty shock if you run this command. If you look at $, it's IO file stat, isn't it? IO file stat. No, you just check the name of the view. IO stat file. I was close. Describe $, IO stat file. If you query this view on your production systems, you may get a nasty shock. So select file type name. I'll take, say, file number, yeah, and file type name. Async IO from $IO stat file. Async is off. Our cloud servers have not enabled asynchronous I/O. And that's just something you get with Amazon Cloud Servers. But you can change it. You can change it. Show parameter. And it will be options. File system I/O options, system I/O options. Alter system set. File system I/O options. You must look this up in Metalink before you do this, because there are all sorts of platform variations. But I'm just going to say set all. It's a static parameter. Scope equals SP file. So I must emphasize before you do this, you must document it, read up on it, and see what the recommendations are for your hardware, your file system. Set all tells RMAN attempts to use both direct I/O and asynchronous I/O. And that can have a huge effect on all sorts of performance, including RMAN. What do we have now? Hey, I've got async I/O. For my data files. So make a note of that. That simple query. Just how is your hardware performing? And for Amazon Cloud Servers, by default, all the async stuff is disabled. And you really do want asynchronous I/O. And that's not just for backup and recovery. It's for normal operation. Note we get synchronous I/O for files that have to be written in real time, such as online log files and the control files, but async I/O on the data files. So make sure you've got async I/O enabled, assuming your hardware can do it. With an RMAN, consider the degree of parallelism and the number of open files. Remember, going back a couple of days, by default, Oracle will multiplex as many files as it can in one backup set. You might well want to control that. Max files per set equals 8 perhaps, or even 1 for maximum speed of restore. So parallelism, this is the guideline, 1 channel per device. I strongly disagree with that, but that's the guideline. I believe in testing and seeing how many channels per device give you best performance. But always remember that optimizing the backup may degrade the restore. So you've got to test both ways. There's an example of enabling asynchronous I/O for tapes. And we skipped over the tapes, of course, but tapes are often very different because of the way the devices actually work. And you'll need to be looking at the documentation provided for your device. You may need to slow RMAN down. I mentioned yesterday, recently, modern hardware, I no longer bother to do this. because modern hardware, for the clients I happen to have worked on, the disk arrays haven't really had a problem. But this will give you a limit of the speed. A more sophisticated algorithm is the duration parameter. This we're stating half an hour. Backup duration 30 minutes, minimize load. What this means is Oracle will start the backup and monitor how long it's taking. And if it thinks the backup might complete more quickly, it will slow it down. So this is in effect a guarantee that the backup will take half an hour, even if it could be done faster. Yep, slowing down, reducing the impact. And that then is what you need to think about. Test your channels. Test how many channels you want. Consider the effect of file multiplexing. How many files per set? If I were, for example, to backup database, files per set 1. Oops. Not connected to Oracle. Okay, let me go in again. I must have I bounced the database instance, didn't I? So backup database files per set 1. Right. I'm now going to get, I've got about 5 or 6 data files. I'm going to get 5 or 6 backup sets. That will typically mean that restore of one data file will be really fast, but the backup itself is going to take forever. And so swings and roundabouts. Consider how many open files you want, the effect of file multiplexing. Yep, there you go. 1 file per backup set. So to conclude, the report command will show you what needs to be backed up as a general rule. The list command shows you what you've got. Then you've got your reality check and the maintenance. Right, I'll show you the scripts I've got here. What we have, this is taken from one of our production systems, RMAN daily backup.sh. Right, I'll expand the font. We have a cron job that runs this script. Format, font. And you'll see, don't bother taking notes, by the way, you'll see the scripts themselves in the next chapter. But what this is doing is launching a bash shell, sourcing.bash profile, setting an estate format. Remember, I like to have dates formatted properly in RMAN. Setting my search path, my path. And now we see an operating system command. Find $home JW. Our backups go to a direct, on this server, they go to a directory called JW. And I'm using mtime plus 10 and sending the results to xargs. Depending how good you are with Unix shell scripting, what I'm doing is I'm searching that directory for all files that haven't been modified for 10 days. And every file that hasn't been modified for 10 days, I'm removing. So operating system commands to delete stuff more than 10 days old. Then here, for SID in, I'm looping through a series of databases running on this machine. Those there SID, none of these exist anymore, by the way, it's all been changed since, but I'm looping through a set of databases. As I loop through them, do to done. Set the variable, source the OREMV file, RMAN target, and I'm running a script we'll see in the next chapter. Then I'm using SQL Plus to do, guess what? I'm running a script, RMAN output.SQL, and emailing the results to Bob and to me. That's one long command. So I'm running SQL Plus to query something and email out the results. Then we run another RMAN script, log on to the target, whichever one the target I'm in the loop, in the do loop, and run RMAN daily maintenance. So those are the two guts of the commands, the two major commands. We've got RMAN daily backup, and there's RMAN daily backup, and that was the one that did the backup, launches this channel, backup as compressed backup set. Restore validate, we haven't seen yet, but we will do. Then I'm going on to email something. What did RMAN output do? RMAN output. This is format, font, 14, okay. It's selecting output from that view, read all RMAN output, and emailing results.
What if you shut down an instance and when you're doing your backup?
If you shut it down, it depends precisely on your release. In earlier releases, it would shut down, of course the backup would fail, and then you start it up, run the backup again, and it would start from the beginning. In later releases, it's quite good at realizing how far the backup got and starting up from where it left off. So the exact effect depends on your release.
So to do the RMAN backup, your instance has to be running?
Absolutely. It's got to be in mount mode at least, either mount mode or open. Why must it be?
So if you're doing a cold one, so you're mounted, right?
Yes. Cold backups are done in mount mode.
So if you're doing mount mode, you're doing cold backup in mount mode, will that information still be in the RMAN, in the output?
Yes, it will be. It will be in the output. Okay. They'll be lost when you restart. So if you did that,
it'll be lost when you open it?
I think it will survive when you open, but it will be lost when you shut down. So basically, if you're doing this sort of thing, you want to do that immediately afterwards to make sure you get it.
Well, you wouldn't shut down to the next day when you backed up, right?
Yeah. And the next day, you would, yes,
because this right here, because you're going to shut down, you're going to start up mount, then you're going to run your RMAN script. So then the information will be in that view.
It will be at that point. But the next time you shut down, of course, you'll have lost it. Yeah.
It'll lose, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So, we're doing that. Emailing out the results.
What is the record? Is it recommended to do hot or cold with RMAN?
I would always do hot. I would always do open backups. Why do you want to shut down your database? Why do it? Always remember this. As a general rule, an Oracle database will perform better the longer it's running. Now, if you do shut down, start up, mount, backup, also database open, if you do that every day is losing all the information that's accumulated about SQL execution and things. Generally speaking, you don't want to shut it down unless you have to.
Okay.
Yeah, and the hot backups are absolutely rock solid. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, the next script I'm running is the maintenance script, and my daily maintenance script is doing this. That's all commented out because that was going to the tape library. I'm launching this channel. I'm doing a cross-check. Delete no prompt expired. And that's going to be doing something every day because our earlier script was deleting files. So we want to tell RMAN to see what files have been deleted and remove their references. And then we delete no prompt obsolete, which will get rid of, I can't remember what the configured retention is on this. That will get rid of the old backups, any that haven't been removed already because of that. And of course, delete archive log all. That will be not happen depending on the archive log deletion policy. And then, because I'm me, backup current control file. And we also have the auto backup.
John, is it considered redundant then to do the find and the remove with the delete?
Yes, it is. It is. Theoretically, the delete obsolete would be enough. But what you can find sometimes, if scripts fail for any reason, maybe the cron doesn't run them correctly or something, then you might have stuff hanging about. If the cron job failed and this backup wasn't run, well, then I won't be deleting things. So I want to clear them off from here anyway. But you're right. There's some redundancy here. Here. The final line, just for completeness, by the way, that's copying everything to tape with the no delete switch. And you'll see fully worked examples of these scripts in the next chapter. I just wanted to show the commands we're using, the significance of the cross-check. Cross-check expired and obsolete.
No problem.